What's lovelier than spring? It's warm, weather at last, and the first fresh asparagus is in the markets. What dreams of butter and glory! It's asparagus from tip to butt, today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
I just adore fresh asparagus, and I think I'm terribly serious about it, so I always go to a market that takes asparagus very seriously and lovingly, because I found that a lot of markets just don't seem to care very much what they do with it, and they let it sit out where it all gets dried up and stale. And if you notice, when you see a big crate of asparagus like this, there's always a piece of cotton or sort of material that's absorbent in the bottom, and the bottoms or the butts of the asparagus are supposed to be kept moist. And if the store is not going to keep it in a crate like this and keep it moist, they should at least stand it up in bunches so that the butts are standing in about half an inch of water, because you have to think that asparagus is just like a flower, and you have to keep it moist and cool, or else it just dries up and it isn't good. So I pick a store very carefully, and I also pick one where I can pick all the asparagus personally so that I can get them all the same size. And when you're buying asparagus, you want to be sure. I'm going to show you an example of a good asparagus and a bad asparagus. Now here's a good one. You want to make sure that the butts are quite moist and that they're firm and even all the way up the end. And then at the end, the tip is tightly closed and the little scales are just nothing but scales. That the asparagus doesn't look like this. Now look at the tip here. It's beginning to get loose, and rather than having scales, there are little flower buds that are coming out underneath. And this one also has a dowager's hump, which means that it isn't very good. It's maybe a little old, and it has a fissure going down through the middle. So that if you can pick out the asparagus yourself, you'd never pick one like this, which is a bad example. You would pick one that was fresh and green and straight, like this. So if you pick your store rightly, you'll be able to get the kind of asparagus you like. And if it doesn't look right, don't buy it, because you'll be disappointed in it. And when you bring it home, if you're not going to use it right away, I would suggest, if the butts seem a little bit dry, that you gather all the butts together and then just cut off a little bit until you get to the moist flesh, and then stick it in a pot with about half an inch of water, because again, like a flower, if the butt is in water, the asparagus will stay fresh. And then I usually put a plastic bag over it and then stick it in the refrigerator, and I find that it will keep even 2 or 3 days this way. Of course, the sooner you cook it, the better. I know an awful lot of people who have asparagus gardens of their own get the water boiling, and then they rush out and they cut all the asparagus and they dump it right in, and they don't let it stay out for more than 2 or 3 minutes. I found I never had an asparagus patch, and I have a black thumb anyway, so I don't suppose it would grow. But I find that if you keep it damp and keep it cold, that it keeps extremely fresh and tastes very good. And now when you're ready to prepare it, you have a lot of people who just take the asparagus and they hold on to the butt end, and then they bend it until it breaks off, and then they throw away the butt. And that's a terribly wasteful way of cooking asparagus, because this butt, if you have good fresh asparagus, you can eat it just as much as the rest of the asparagus. So if you want to enjoy it to the full, you should cook it the way the French do and prepare it that way, which means you have to peel it. And that means taking a little knife and cutting off about 1/4 of an inch of the butt and then peeling all the way up until it gets very tender up about 2 inches from the top. And how deeply to peel the butt depends on how fresh and young it is. And you can always tell by looking very carefully, and you peel just as deeply until you get to the moist flesh. If it's sort of dry and stringy, that means you've got to peel a little deeper, and then you slant slowly upwards until you come to the very tender part. I'll do one more. I always find I like the knife better just because I'm used to using it. This one is green almost all the way down and very tender, so the butt just needs a little shaving. And be sure that you have a very, very sharp knife, because if you have a dull old thing, you find that the peeling is very difficult. I find that holding it this way so that it rests against my wrist, it goes very quickly. And also, I think, well, if you're going to peel, and you really should, get the fattest asparagus you can, because fat asparagus is just as tender as little other asparagus. Now, if you don't like to use the knife, you can try the vegetable peeler, which I think is a horrible system, because it all gets caught in the peeler, and you can't get deep enough on the butt. Now, here's a French vegetable peeler. It's a knife that has a little guard on it, and this is used by French restaurant people. And you lie the asparagus down and just peel, and of course then the peel gets stuck in the knife, but French people seem to like it very much. Now, my husband, who's a wonderful asparagus peeler, uses a Norwegian cheese knife, which makes cheese slices. And I think this works very well, too. He prefers this to the knife. So, I think you'll find after you've done quite a bit of asparagus that you pick your own system of peeling. But I think that you will find if you've never taken the trouble to peel asparagus, you'll find that it makes absolutely all the difference in the world in the asparagus and how it eats. And I'm going to give you a little example. I have here on my board 2 cooked asparagus. And this is a cooked, unpeeled asparagus. It's of top quality. And I just want to show you when you cut it. This is just a plain table knife. And it cuts, and it cuts, and it cuts. And as you get down here, it gets a little harder to cut, and it's sort of stringy. You get down to here, and it's very stringy. So you can't really eat that part. Now here is the peeled asparagus. Cut, 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 getting down to the butt. You see you can cut perfectly easily all the way down just with a plain table fork. And you can eat the butt. QED, as they say in the, whatever it is, I guess it's geometry courses. It's so long ago I can't remember what it was. But I think if you make this experiment yourself, you will find that it is absolutely conclusive. And then after you have your asparagus all prepared, you have to wash it. And here's some that's been all peeled. And just have a sink full of cold water, and it doesn't need to be washed very much. Just squished all around. If by any chance you find that the asparagus is sandy, you may have to lift off some of the scales or even wash it in warm water. Then there's your washed asparagus. And now if you're going to cook it the French way, it should be tied. And you'll see when we cook it what the reason for tying it. And you want to gather it up in bunches of about 2.5 inches in diameter. We've got 2 bunches here, so I want to have a tie at the top and a tie at the bottom and a double one. So I want about 4 16-inch pieces of string. Maybe that's 18 inches. I can't quite tell, but I'm having it big enough. You get your string already. A lot of this seems like a terrible lot of trouble, but asparagus is certainly one of our absolutely most beautiful vegetables, and it's a vegetable that should be taken seriously and given all the care and attention that it needs. Because then you will really enjoy it to the full. Now see, there was one tie at the top and one tie at the bottom. This is really all done very quickly. Now I'm going to leave one spear out, and you'll see why later. Line them up. You want to line them up at the tips so that the tips are all together. And this is all in safe and easy cooking and easy removal so that the asparagus will not break and will remain as long and beautiful as it is now. Now, one of the advantages in peeling are that the asparagus cooks faster, stays greener, and tastes much fresher and has a better texture, and also remains much more dramatic and long. And I've left one loose so that I can use it as a cooking test. And I'm going to cook 3 bunches of asparagus. Now I'm going to cook this in the French manner. Now, after you've done the peeling and tying, you can do this ahead of time and just wrap it in some damp paper towels and put it in a plastic bag and leave it in the refrigerator. As long as it's damp and cold, it will not lose its texture. So you could, if you were having a party, you could peel this in the morning and then wrap it in the damp paper towels in the plastic bag and refrigerate it, and then cook it just before you're ready to serve it. And this is going into a large pot of rapidly boiling water. And I'm putting 3 in there. And I'm going to have 1 spear loose. And then we have 6 quarts of water in here, so I want about 3 tablespoons of salt. Some people don't salt the water until halfway through the cooking. I like to salt it right away because I like to be sure that the salt is in the asparagus, because it makes a great deal of difference to me in the flavor. And you want to be sure that you have a big pot, because again, this is the French method of vegetable cooking, of having a large pot of rapidly boiling water so that the asparagus is seized as it goes in. I could really even use a turkey boiler, it would be better. This is just sort of a medium-sized roaster, which I find is very useful for vegetable boiling as well as roasts and stews. And then this will take, after it comes to the boil, this will take about, because this is very fresh, will take about 6 minutes of boiling. So set your timer for about 5 minutes and then test after 5 minutes, because you don't want to overcook it. And now we have other types of cooking utensils for asparagus. And this is a covered one. Of course, asparagus should cook not covered if it's cooked in the French way. You just don't cover it at all. But this is an asparagus boiler with a rack so that you don't have to tie the asparagus. You can just put it in and let it cook. But I think with this size, you could only cook about a bunch or 2, because the idea of having the rapidly boiling water and having it boil quickly, you could only cook a small amount in it. And then we have another kind. This is for the people, those lazy ones who refuse to peel asparagus. And this is a steaming method. It has a rack, and you put the asparagus in there. And then you put water in about 2 inches to here. And then you cover it up, and the bottoms boil, and the tops steam. And I guess if you're not going to peel asparagus, that's probably the best way of cooking it. And if you didn't have anything else and you still were a non-peeler, you could use a coffee pot and boil the butts and steam the top and put a cork in the spout. The only question would be, I don't know how you get the asparagus out without breaking it all. And then, of course, in the non-asparagus season, you can always use frozen asparagus. This is quite nice large spears. You can get jumbo spears, and you can get cut asparagus. And I'm one who never follows the directions on the box of a package. From my experiments, I like to cook it in a large pot of boiling water, and I let it defrost just enough so it's loose, and then I just put it in and use a salad basket so I can easily lift it out and let it boil rapidly uncovered and add some salt for about 6 to 8 minutes. I guess I'd better put some salt in that or it won't taste the way it should. But I find that this method of the big pot seems to make it taste a little bit fresher than boiling it the way they say on the package in a little covered pot with some salt. I find it gets sort of mushy that way. You notice with the frozen asparagus, they never peel it, so that you'll get that, as we saw when we cut it off, you get that sort of filandrous part. So I'm going to move this over to the other side. I think a lovely thing about hot asparagus is if you're on a diet, which I find I often have to be, it's one of those vegetables that you can eat with just nothing but lemon and salt. Or, of course, you can use melted butter, lemon butter, or drawn butter, or hollandaise. And I'm going to make a type of hollandaise called a sauce maltaise, which is a hollandaise with orange flavor, and it's absolutely delicious. I've often heard about it, and then I thought, oh heavens, that sounds sort of queer. So then one day I tried it, and I found it was absolutely delicious, and it makes a terribly nice change. You can also use it with broccoli, and it's perfectly delicious. I'm going to make about a cup of it, and I have the grated rind of 1 orange, and then we want a mixture of orange and lemon juice, about 2 or 3 tablespoons. So I'm just going to put that in my little juicer. This really is made just exactly like a hollandaise, and I just purposely did it so that we could do hollandaise again without too much talking, and you'll see again how easy it is to do. 3 egg yolks, and that's a little pan. And as you remember, you always, before you do anything, you beat up the egg yolks until they get thick and sticky, which is about a minute. And never, this is, as you remember, in both mayonnaise and hollandaise, you always beat the egg yolks before you do anything. This just gets them into shape so that they won't be balky. And then a little bit of salt, about a 1/4 teaspoon salt, and about 2 tablespoons of mixed orange and lemon juice. And beat it up again. And then over moderate direct heat, beat it until it begins to thicken into a custard. And I think that you ought to get in the habit of not getting so scared of egg yolks and hollandaise and not worry about beating it over direct heat, because you can always lift the pan up, you see the way I'm doing. So you have perfect control of it. And remember always that your object is that you're heating the egg yolks slowly and gradually until they thicken. You see I'm moving it on and off. And now there's a little bit of steam that's just beginning to come up. So that shows me that the egg yolks are just going to begin to thicken. And remember too that you have some grated orange peel in here so that those little lumps you see are not lumps of eggs, at least not yet. But I think if you're going to get in you just have to learn to do the direct method of hollandaise. And even if you do scramble an egg or 2 at first, now see now that's getting thick. You see that's your thick custard now. See how quick and easy that is, and now the butter is ready to go in, and you can add from 3/4 to 1 cup. And remember that at first, just like making a mayonnaise, the butter has to go in just in little driblets. This is just plain melted butter. because you remember that delicate digestion of the egg yolk. And if the butter goes in too fast, the digestion, which is a slow process in the egg yolk, doesn't take. So that's why at the beginning you just have to do it in little driblets. The sauce is nice and thick now, so it can go in a little bit faster. Remember also, do not go over 1.25 cups of butter. That would be a little over 2 sticks. But you can add less if you'd like. But you see how extremely fast that is to do. And you just have to determine that you're going to do it, because it's part of your cooking mastery, and and I think it's so much fun to do it by hand because you have complete control. See, that's a nice thick sauce, and you want to taste it now to make sure that it's just right. And it's just delicious. Wait till you try it. That sort of little whisper of orange taste is delicious. Now, if you're going to make it ahead, leave it on the top of the stove where it's lukewarm. Be sure that you don't overheat it, or it'll just thin out or curdle, but we've seen how to bring it back, which is very easy indeed. And now I'm going to see how the asparagus is doing. I'll bring it over here so we can get a better look at it. I think it's not quite done yet. You can tell by lifting it up, and that just needs a little bit more. But you just have to, in any green vegetable cooking, you can't go by a vegetable timing table. You have to be right over that and watch it, because as soon as it's done, you should take it out. And now, on the other hand, we're going to serve this fresh asparagus hot, but if you want to serve asparagus cold, we will do this on the frozen asparagus. After that's done, you can see how nice this salad basket is. Have a tray and a folded towel and just dump it out. And then if you're going to serve asparagus cold, you want to be very sure that you separate it, because if you leave it all in a lump and it cools off, it loses its lovely fresh texture because it's steaming. And what it should do is to cool separately, so it will cool as quickly as possible. And then after that's cool, then you can serve it with whatever kind of a sauce you're going to use. And now I think our fresh asparagus is done. I want to show you this asparagus platter. It has an insert in it, if I can get it out, with holes, see? So that the asparagus water goes down into the bottom of the platter, and then so you don't have a lot of messy water when you're serving the asparagus. This is also good for fish. And now, when your asparagus is done, you want to lift it up. And it should just you see, that's just very slightly drooping. Just very slightly. It shouldn't, if it droops too much, it's overdone. And this is why we have the loose spear. You can see how that is by cutting it and then eating a piece. It's a little too hot, but you can tell by eating through. I think maybe I can eat it. Just done. You want it to be very slightly crunchy. But it's a shame when you've gone to all this work to overcook it. Now you're going to see the reason for the strings. I can lift it right over there, and there's no damaging of the asparagus. And cut off the strings and spread it out. To let it drip off. If you don't have an asparagus platter, use a double damask dinner napkin, which will absorb the water. You always have to train to get so that you can handle things as hot as possible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get the string off here. Now, there's our last one. But you can see that this is beautiful. It's retain all of its beautiful green, fresh texture and color. In other words, what the scientists would say, all its nutrients are there, as well as its beauty. Now, if you want to keep it warm and you're not serving it immediately, you can just set it over your hot water. You can even put a towel over it. But I think the sooner you eat it, the better. However, you can serve it warm or just lukewarm. Now we have our sauce, which is kept nicely. And be sure and try this sauce, because it is just lovely with this asparagus. I think if you have asparagus every day in season, the way I usually do, you like to have a little change in sauces. And so now we're ready to serve. I can get these both together. There, and this asparagus is so beautiful that we're going to have it as a separate course. That's the way the French do. Because it's such a beautiful vegetable, it's just a shame to let it be mixed up with anything else. So we have a large serving for each person. And a beautiful dollop of that lovely sauce on. I think really, when you get beautiful asparagus, I think it should be served as a separate course. You can either use it as the first course for a dinner party, or instead of a salad course. Now I want to show you about eating it. This is my system, which I think is very good, which is to cut the tips off, leave them in a little pile, and then cut the middle part. And then I always start in with the butts first and just eat them, and then I eat all the middle part, and then I save the tips for the end. And then I will show you a French method in which you have the large pieces of asparagus and the sauce, and then you just pick it up and eat it in your hands. So really, what's nicer than a great big plate of fresh asparagus all by itself? It's the most marvelous way to begin a meal. And I think it's just irresistible. Just picking it up in the fingers and dipping it all in. I really think this is the most elemental way of eating it.
That's all for today on The French Chef. This is for Julia Child, who would, if she could, say bon appetit. The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.